2001. Turn on the radio and you could hear this, or this, or maybe even this. Head to the cinema and you could watch a low-ish budget street racing thriller called The Fast and the Furious.
One race, 2G buy-in, winner takes all.
16 years on and about to release its 8th film, that's right, 8th, The Fate of the Furious, we look back on a franchise that has become an international blockbuster phenomenon. We'll be meeting the cast in New York and Berlin, hanging out with the guy behind the franchise's incredible vehicles and attempting to work out what makes the series such a brilliant, beloved, utterly bonkers success all over the world. As you may have guessed, I'm a bit of a fan. And I know what you're thinking, 8 movies, that's a fair few. Well, if you're not entirely up to speed with all things Fast and the Furious, here comes the science bit. Well, the history bit, where I catch you up with all things Fast and the Furious, fastly and furiously. Now listen up, because I'm only going to say this once. The first film was, of course, The Fast and the Furious. Meet elite street racer Dom Toretto, Vin Diesel, his girlfriend Letty, Michelle Rodriguez, his sister Mia, Jordana Brewster, and the undercover cop trying to bust their asses for hijacking trucks full of TV VHS combos, Brian O'Connor, Paul Walker. Anyway, Brian falls for Mia, becoming bros with Dom in the process and letting them all off the hook in the end.
I owe you 10-second car.
The second film in the franchise is Too Fast, Too Furious. As Vin was too busy shooting XXX, the first FNF follow-up is entirely non-Dom, with a now on-the-lam Brian in Miami, teaming up with childhood buddy Roman Pierce, Tyrese Gibson, and undercover customs agent Monica Fuentes, Eva Mendes, to take down a local drug lord. Helping them is an amazingly afro Ludacris, playing tech whiz garage owner Tej Parker, but really it's the Brian and Roman Show, a sillier, more candy-coloured sequel boasting this bridge jump, this boat leap, and the infamous ejector scene. Ejectocito, cuz! In 2006, the third Fast and Furious movie came out, Tokyo Drift. Fast and the Furious number 3 gives us a whole new set of characters, aside from a Vin Diesel cameo at the end, and a brand new location, Tokyo. And yes, there is a lot of drifting. Even die-hard fans of the franchise agree Tokyo Drift ain't great, but it did introduce us to the immensely cool Han, son Kang, who dies in a car crash and we later discover is actually also called Han Solo. More on him later. The fourth Fast and the Furious came out in 2009 and dispensed with all of the thes. They're back! Dom, Brian, Mia, Letty. Well, Letty's only back for a bit as she gets killed. Or does she? In other news, there's a great fuel tanker heist and a car chase inside some smugglers' caves, but generally this is a darker, more introspective Fast and Furious, ending with Dom being sent off to jail for pretty much everything. Here he is, in a coach, going to jail. He's definitely going to jail. Or does he? He definitely doesn't go to jail. Brian and the crew break him out, resulting in this incredible line from a reporter.
A shocking escape that amazingly resulted in no fatalities this afternoon.
And the gang, including a now pregnant Mia, move to Rio, but not before they heist some cars from a train and jump into a humongous canyon. And yet, big as the Hulk DSS agent Luke Hobbs, The Rock, is after them, standing in the way of the crew's plans to steal $100 million from a local drug kingpin. Oh, and Tej is back, and so is Roman, and Han, somehow, who was also in Fast and Furious briefly, but I glossed over it, and Giselle, a former Mossad agent who also cropped up in Fast and Furious, and I forgot to tell you about, and even more people I won't bore you with. The film ends with a what on earth am I watching car chase where 2 muscle cars drag a safe full of cash around Rio, smashing everything and everyone up in the process. Nearly there, guys. We are on Fast and the Furious 6, which, unbelievably, is the 6th in the franchise. Guys, Letty ain't dead. She survived the events of Fast and Furious and has been suffering from amnesia, somehow ending up in a rival crew led by Owen Shaw, Luke Evans, and it's up to Team Dom, as I'm calling them, to work with Hobbs to take them down and rescue Letty. Not that she really needs rescuing, she's Michelle Rodriguez. A ridiculous street race around central London later, including a car designed to flip other cars, like this robot of a Robot Wars, and a chase involving a tank, a military convoy, and Roman gliding like a flying squirrel, and Letty is back on side, but still remembers nothing. Team Shaw are getting away on a gigantic cargo plane before Team Dom stop them on the longest runway ever. Notable highlights: this flying headbutt, this leg maneuver, and Dom walking out of the flames like a Terminator. Sadly, Giselle dies in the chase, and a now heartbroken Han goes to Japan as you discover that chronologically, Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift takes place after the events of Fast and Furious 6, and Owen Shaw's brother, Deckard, Jason Statham, is behind Han's death. Mind blown. Anyway, Fast and Furious 7. Deckard chases after the crew as they work with Secret Service wonk Mr. Nobody, Kurt Russell, to find hacking doodad God's Eye and rescue its creator, Ramsey, Natalie Emmanuel. Along the way, they parachute some cars into an Azerbaijan mountain range, fly to Abu Dhabi and ruin someone's party, and face off against a new team led by Moses Jakande, Jimon Honsu. Retreating to their hometown of LA, Team Dom battle Deckard and Jakande, with The Rock busting out of hospital to take down a stealth helicopter and an aerial drone. After pretty much everything blows up and a Spanner versus Shard of Shrapnel hand-to-hand fight with Dom, Deckard is sent to prison. And finally, we have the fate of the Furious. As for the new movie, not much is known publicly aside from what has been seen in the trailers. Charlize Theron is a dreadlocked cyber terrorist capable of controlling cars at the touch of a button. Dom has gone rogue, and at one point, a submarine blasts through the ice during a Russia-set chase sequence. Plus, The Rock pushes a torpedo into a car, and there is a gigantic wrecking ball. In short, it looks epic. And these are the Fast and Furious movies so far. I hope you've learned something, because I am exhausted. In that seemingly never-ending recap of cinema's slickest soap opera, you may have noticed some cars. Some utterly amazing, too good for Top Gear, I could probably jump that ravine if I was going fast enough, cars. Now, there is one man behind all of them, and his name is Dennis McCarthy, and he is, without a doubt, the luckiest petrolhead on the planet.
So I got involved with the Fast and Furious franchise going back, gosh, I want to say it was 12 years ago. I was working on a project with Jim Brubaker at the time, was head of physical production at Universal Studios. And just one day he asked me out of nowhere, hey, what do you know about this sport of drifting? I go, pretty good at sliding a car around. I might hit a curb or two once in a while, but what do you want to know? Well, I want to know the history of it. I want to know everything about it. Okay, great, did a little research, put a little book together for him, and a few days later, I get a call, hey, can you come down to the studio? Yeah, sure. I walked into a boardroom, and there was about 20 copies of my book laid out on a big conference table, and everybody was ready to talk about drifting. And at the time, I didn't even know it was leading to the movie Tokyo Drift, but it was apparent, pretty instantaneously that's what it was. And the next thing I knew, I was on a plane going to Japan.
You are actually smart to have talked to Dennis McCarthy, because he's the only person that I trust in that process. It's amazing how some of these cars have become so iconic. What is more, there is no more, the most iconic car in the world is Dom Toretto's car. A lot of that credit goes to Dennis McCarthy.
The cool thing about a Fast and Furious movie, it's really not all about my style. I mean, there's cars, I would say that the cars that, kind of fit what I would want to drive really fall into Dom's world. The muscle cars, big blocks, that type of thing. But the franchise, allows me to put, there's so many cars that we have to put in the film, it allows me to put, I think, everybody's favorite in the movie. And that's what I try to do. I mean, I get calls or emails from people all over the world, looking for specific cars, and I can kind of get you always have a sense just on, what people are looking for, what the import crowd's looking for, what the latest and greatest in the, the supercar market is. And just trying to get something in there for everybody. There's always these cars in these movies that are really the high effort cars, the cars that you really put a lot of effort, a lot of work into, a lot of time into. On Fast 6, it was, the Dodge Daytona for Vin was a car that we really put a lot of time into. But the car that was really cool and different that seemed to get more attention than anything else was the flip car. A vehicle that was basically designed just to run into other vehicles and flip them up into the air, which it did perfectly. So it really was unique, and once again, that's something we strive for in the franchise, is to, bring things that you haven't seen to film, and this definitely qualifies as something that no one's seen before. Here we have, this was Brian's Escort in Fast 6. This is a car that was basically in the sequence where we had the tank on the highway. So not really a great combination, a tank on a highway and a lot of cars, but it does go down for one of those sequences that probably destroyed more cars than any other sequence. I'm gonna say it's kind of maybe a toss-up. Vault Heist in 5, tank sequence on 6, but nonetheless, the amount of wreckage was unbelievable. One of the greatest locations we've been to yet, or I guess the most remote locations, was Iceland. And in Iceland, this is what Roman drove, which is, something that you normally wouldn't see out on the ice. But the car fits his character. The Lamborghini's all-wheel drive. It was actually, the car was a true, I'll call it a trooper. It just kept going and going and going, even with the incredible amount of abuse it went through. I mean, I can't tell you how many times the front of this car got smashed, how many times we ripped wheels off the car, how many clutches it went through, but like I said, at the end of the day, still got home, drove on the trailer. I think with a franchise as successful as the Fast and Furious, the biggest challenge is keeping it exciting, keeping it where the fans aren't gonna show up and say, well, we've seen that before.
So yeah, cars are of course a big part of the franchise's success, but what separates the Fast and Furious from the rest of the pack is what they're willing to do with them in the name of nitro-fueled action set pieces. I'll give you a clue. It normally involves ridiculous jumps and explosions.
I think you have a combination of cars that are beautiful, the most exotic cars in the world, the most expensive cars in the world, so there's a lot of romanticism involved with cars, right? When we see the cars and it's like, man, these cars are beautiful, but so you take that element of like, there's my favorite car right there, oh, it's my dream car right there, and it's flying out of a plane through the air? God, what? So I think it's that, where it's like, it's that kind of thing where, you take these beautiful cars and you put them in these scenarios that are just crazy.
My favorite action sequence was probably the first one with the train. Maybe because we had to shoot that practical, and it was at a time where you still filmed everything practical. There was probably no green screen at all in the first one. I think that we've done a good job in maintaining practical elements to our movie. There was a point in between the fourth one and the fifth one where when we transitioned, we were still holding on to, we were confined to the realm of reality in 4, and in 5, we broke those chains, and we broke it with reckless abandon.
Obviously in movies nowadays, there's a lot of CG, there's a lot that goes on to enhance things, to make things more exciting, and frequently to make things safer. But at least with the Fast and Furious franchise, everything you see a car doing, the car's, really doing it. There's stuff that people see the trailer and they say, my God, that's incredible. The explosion on the ice, that must have been one hell of a CG product. I go, no, man, that was special effects building a big ass bomb under the ice that blew cars up into the air, So same goes for the wrecking ball, like the trailer, they go, people automatically say, well, is that CG? It's like, no, man, that was, I think, to my knowledge, that was the biggest wrecking ball ever constructed by the effects team, and it literally had to come in 4 different pieces to set, be assembled, and it would just take cars out like they were, tin cans.
When we pitched the idea of the wrecking ball, you have to see what was built in order to make that scene. There's a little movie magic here and there just for safety, but we literally had a wrecking ball almost, half the size of this room smashing through cars. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the practical effect of these cars kind of, flying around like that. It is challenging at times as well because you're talking about one of the biggest movies ever. You shoot in Cuba, which didn't have the infrastructure to take on a movie of this size. You shoot in New York City, cars traveling, 100 plus miles an hour in Times Square, which is impossible to do, let alone permit.
We talk about difficult scenes from the franchise. The vault heist, that was absolutely incredible. And we had the special effects crew actually built gigantic safes. They were obviously lighter than, what would have been probably a 15,000 pound vault, but it was a real vault, probably in excess of 1,000 pounds. Hooked to cables, took 2 Dodge Chargers, driving through the streets of, Puerto Rico, played for Brazil. But man, it was truly, to see to be on set those days and see this safe swinging around and tumbling and taking out 6 or 7 parked cars was amazing. Another great gag that we used as a tool was basically the effects crew built a vault on the front of a semi. We had Mike Ryan, the stunt guy, behind this thing, and you had a close-up camera of this vault coming in to 6, 7 cars on the bridge, and I mean, it would just blow these cars over. It was such a cool sequence, and like I said, in the end, there's a box hitting cars, and there's a box being dragged behind cars, and and all the things that you would assume could happen, like the box getting tied up or hung up. There's so many variables, but the cool thing about it was, yes, you had to plan the boxes go here and here, but if it deviated, it was still great.
There's just so many amazing guys who just have all the fun. I mean, they hog up the fun. That's what they do. I mean, most of the fighting stuff is the only thing they'll train you to like play around with. But as far as the amazing car stunts, I mean, that's all them, man. They're the ones in Iceland, having to go early because of climate change just to, pull off a bunch of shots with cars on the ice, exploding tanks, and I mean, come on, I'm in the wrong line of work here.
There's a lot of egos in Fast and Furious, right? And mine, by the way, takes the cake because I'm like, listen, I need to have a real drone and I'm gonna get myself in the ambulance. I'm just gonna fly off the bridge and like, you can't do it, insurance purposes, it's not. It's like, hey.
This is what I thought. Oh, I could be an action movie star, jump out of windows and do all this really cool stuff. And here I am, crying in a corner while all the stunt doubles have all the fun.
I want to make something clear here. There are some moments, mainly the action set pieces, sure, in the Fast and the Furious franchise that are truly, absolutely ludicrous, jaw-droppingly, gobsmackingly, air-punchingly ludicrous. So ludicrous, in fact, that I've put together my top 5 most ludicrous moments from the whole series. And bizarrely, ludicrous isn't actually in any of them. At number 5, from Fast 5, Gal Gadot getting the bad guy to grab her bum, then using the bikini bottom she's wearing as a fingerprint sample to break into his safe. At number 4, from Fast and the Furious 6, the rocks throw him round the room like a ragdoll interrogation technique of a man that looks a bit like Vin Diesel, but is actually some Cockney bloke. And at number 3, the car headbutt from Fast and the Furious 7, where Vin Diesel and the Staith enjoy a head-to-head sports car versus muscle car collision in the worst game of chicken ever. Number 2 is also from Fast and the Furious 7, where Dom and Brian drive a supercar across not 1, not 2, but 3 skyscrapers. And at number 1, from Fast and the Furious 6, Dom catches Letty mid-air, aka Vin Diesel crashing his car into the side of a motorway to catapult himself into the air to catch Michelle Rodriguez flying into the sky after being slung into orbit by an out-of-control tank, landing together safely on the windscreen of another car. And yet, the reason Fast and the Furious gets away with this Looney Tunes action, somewhat nonsensical plotting and general goofiness is because of one thing. The sense of family, both on screen and off. As newcomer and villain for the new movie, Charlize Theron will tell you.
I tend to feel that the chemistry between this cast is what has kind of kept it as grounded, and I think has kept the fans so loyally invested in seeing them sometimes do some, pretty outrageous, crazy things and forgiving them for that. And I think it's that chemistry between all of them that kind of roots all of it. I think that's what grounds a lot of where the stories can go in these movies.
Fast 8 is, as we know, the biggest trailer in history. So when we launched the trailer in Times Square December 11th of last year, it broke all records. What's the biggest moment in that trailer?
Dom! You gonna turn your back on family?
It's just a simple damn kiss. That speaks volumes of how much the audience knows. The jaws were on the ground. You could have shown them spaceships. You had Cypher kiss Dom, and the world stopped.
Dom Toretto's scooter. We're literally stealing that scooter.
During the filming, we would do barbecues during the day, just full barbecues, and just so in between shots we'd go, and Tyrese would be barbecuing up, singing R&B, and doing whatever else, and we'd have a great time. You know what? It's so much fun, and with the characters, with Luda and Reese and Dwayne and Vin, it just feels so right even though there's a giant submarine or whatever coming at you, you're supposed to be, it just feels like, wow, this could work. This could work. Let's throw a joke in there. While we're running away from the submarine, let's throw a joke in. Yeah, okay, that's funny.
Hey, Mia, you better hide your baby, or I'm just playing.
You better hide that big-ass forehead.
I was just joking. Whatever.
Ludacris came up to me before that, and he goes, hey, say this, better hide that big-ass forehead of yours. I was like, okay. He didn't tell anybody. Tyrese didn't know. The director, Justin Lin, didn't. Nobody knew. Bang, I throw the line out. Ludacris spits his drink out, and then it makes the movie.
Let me tell you something. Me and you, one-on-one, no one else around. I will beat your ass like a Cherokee drum.
Maybe one day we'll find out.
Between my directing style, which is allow my actors to improvise, and Jason and Dwayne going at it back and forth, that one moment, Cherokee drum is definitely all Dwayne. We almost ruined the take. We laughed so loud when he said that. So there's a lot of moments like that, and I love it because it's real.
Paul Walker was a huge part of the Fast and Furious family. When he passed away in late 2013, halfway through the production of Fast and Furious 7, one of the people that made the series so special had suddenly disappeared. But with the help of his younger brothers, a patient studio, some stellar CGI, and some deft scriptwriting, the team found a way to say goodbye.
Tributes are being paid to Paul Walker, the actor who shot to fame in the Fast and Furious series of action movies, who's died in a car crash in California.
What do people say to you when they recognize you in the streets? Because, this is, as you say, a cultural phenomenon.
What I get, my favorite, honestly, is Brian. I like Brian. When I get Paul Walker, I run. Yeah, because there's two different varieties, right? There's the fans, and there's the celebrity freaks, right? That's the way I look. I separate them, and it's like, I love the fans. So anywhere I go, if somebody comes up to me and they call me Brian, I want to sit down and talk with them. I'll powwow. That's the trick. You want to get me, call me Brian.
When I spoke to Paul for Fast and Furious 6, he always told me that he didn't have much time for people that spoke to him in the street and called him Paul. He always had time for people that said, hey Brian, how's it going?
Well said. That's so true. And what does that say? That's a pride of ownership. That's him saying how proud he was to be associated with O'Connor. He used to say that all the time. That's interesting that he said that.
I like Vin a lot. Initially I was somewhat intimidated, just because he's Vin Diesel, you know what I mean? So when I found out I was gonna be doing this with Vin, I called him up and I said, yeah, so give me the lowdown on Vin, what's the story? They said, oh, he's really good, but we'll give him kind of a one-up and let him know that you're a good guy too and everything will be fine. I said, all right. It wouldn't have made a difference one way or the other. I mean, he's like the nicest guy in the world.
He would love that there's still this family going on. I spoke to Scott Eastwood and he said he's never worked with a group of people as welcoming and as generous.
Paul took a lot of pride in the fact that we started this thing in 2000 and it existed today and it was growing. That was something but he was also somebody that believed we could always reach higher. And that was a great thing to have, and that was something I loved about him, because it challenged us to continue to try to reach higher to make a better experience.
How proud are you of how you said goodbye, both in that film and in this one?
Maybe it's too close for me to think of it in terms of being proud. I don't think, I don't know if it's a closed book. I don't know if it's, ironically, after 3 years, it doesn't feel like it's resolved in a weird way.
Paul's legacy echoes on in the new movie, with Vin and the rest of the Fast family finding a way of paying homage to their friend whilst continuing the saga in a way that I won't spoil for you just now. And that's the other thing. The family that makes these movies really, really cares about Paul, about each other, about the characters and what they're trying to say. And it's this love of what they're doing that really shines through.
Love. I think love is a huge component. You know, to love the people that you work with. The amount of care that goes into the characters.
But the question remains, what is the secret of the Fast and the Furious?
I would probably say timing, globalization, age of information, accessibility to digital media, accessibility to theaters in third world countries, and then multiculturalism and showing respect to various, cultures through the characters portrayed on the screen. And, if you look at the way that the love is spread amongst the team of Fast and Furious, nobody's like, the lapdog. You know what I mean?
Multiculturalism is high up there as well. I mean, in the first film, the diversity was part of the plot, was in service of the plot. Different gangs from different neighborhoods. But by the time I started producing it, the table was a multicultural one, and I think that is something that the world identifies with, and I think it's a huge part of our success.
I don't know what the reasons are. The point is that ultimately, at the end of the day, you have something that penetrates all these markets, but the color of the skin of the people, portrayed in most of these movies or products, they're white. They're not, they don't look like the people watching them. And so people feel included. We gave them, kind of like a ticket to enter through the side door of Hollywood,
So, there are the cars, the action, the sense of family, the fans all over the world, the multicultural cast, and the love. But there's something else, something that makes me happy every single time I watch these movies, and I've watched them a few times. And that is the sense of humour. The franchise can jump from "they wouldn't dare do that to my favourite character" drama to "I'm just going to go high-five this stranger" fun so well, and that's what sets it apart for me. These films are fun and somehow grounded too. The absurdity they can get away with is unparalleled. And that, for me, is the secret of the Fast and the Furious. They can deliver the impossible with a wink on their face and look good doing it.